Carla Gutierrez's career has included The Last Out, Pray Away, Julia, and an Emmy nomination for RBG. She's here now to discuss her latest documentary from Amazon MGM Studios, Frida, giving viewers a raw and magical journey into the life of iconic artist Frida Kahlo. Carla, what inspired you to tell Frida's story, and how did you want to separate your film from other projects we've seen or read about Frida in the past?
So I feel like I've been carrying this story inside of me for a long time, since I got obsessed with Frida, as many young women do, when I was much younger. And I have, had a relationship with her paintings for a few decades, actually, feeling really close to her art and like finding refuge in her art. But it was really a few years ago when the idea popped into my head, and I went back to the books that I had read when I was young, that I saw that her voice was very present. She had left this, very rich testimony of her life, but it was all in written materials, in letters, in essays. There were hundreds of letters that she sent to her loved ones, a few print interviews. And that was what I felt could be a unique way of telling her story that I hadn't seen in film before, actually using her own voice and her own words to narrate the emotional experience of her life, and to really understand how her life was really so, connected to the art that she's left for us. Um, and so I decided to, this was the type of film that I wanted to hear, and to see about Frida, and I decided to just jump in and say, okay, I need to direct this because her voice hasn't been the center, the focus of a film before, her own words. And so that was the approach that we gave to the film.
And you've worked many years as an editor, so
Mhm.
you really felt passionately about this, where you wanted this to be the one you direct yourself.
Yeah, it was really this story that, this is pretty much the reason why I've become a director. It was the story that told me, like, you have the experience as an editor to know how to tell this story, and you feel so close to her. So why not? Like, I just felt like it was my story, the approach that we were giving, this film, that it was my approach to give to the audience.
And what's fascinating about it, as you mentioned, is it's in her own words. So we're
Mhm.
really seeing things directly from her. How long did that take? I mean, how much material did you actually have? And then how do you begin to sort of go through that and work with to say, okay, this goes in, this comes out, like, because I imagine it was a huge quantity of material.
So, most people that get to know about her life, read about her life, they only get fragments of, some of the letters, some of the things that she's written. So you get to know her just through some fragments of her own words. So my team actually ended up collecting all the writings that we, could have access to. And the writings are in different places. Not all of them have been published. So we really probably, have like the largest database that, we didn't find any other database of all of her writings. There was a lot of material that we had, like about 450, 500 letters that she wrote, to people. And and then really, what we really wanted to do was to capture, this woman's spirit, and not to present her as, to humanize her, not to only show her as kind of like the symbol that she's become. She's a symbol of woman empowerment. A lot of times people see her as a symbol of sexiness. You can see her face everywhere. But really to get the texture of her personality, and even learn about her fragility. Like, we didn't want to present like perfect woman, because none of us are perfect, but really kind of like the complexity. And it's her complexity, all the layers of this woman that she wanted to express through art, and she found her voice through art. So it was a process of, reading everything, really everything. Like, I think we ingested all of Frida, everything that she's left us, to make this film, and then really decide to lean into her emotions, to lean into her fragility, and also to lean into her humor. She was a very humorous, very strong spoken, like, she had a sharp tongue. So really present that aspects of her.
That's one of the things that struck me was her sharp tongue because this was a woman born in 1907. So
Mhm.
she seems very ahead of her time in terms of her sexuality, the way she speaks. I remember when there was a quote I loved that when she opened in Paris and she's like, these rich bitches don't want to buy anything. Men are kings in the art world. So how far ahead of her time did she feel and what was that struggle like for women of that era to be recognized as artists?
I mean, we didn't recognize them and we didn't recognize Frida until like about 20 years after her death. That's when people started discovering her. And I think that the reason why she's connected with so many people is that ultimately, and in our film, we really want to show that ultimately, the story is about a woman that decides not to contain her voice. And, I would love to say that she was ahead of her time then, but now, it feels that she's even ahead of her time now, with everything that like women are dealing with. I mean, in our film, we go into, to struggles that she went through as she was, facing a pregnancy, maybe deciding to, maybe abort the pregnancy or to keep the baby. I mean, those are all things that like we as women deal with. She had a miscarriage. She, wanted to express her pleasure and desire, and I feel that even now we women don't really talk about these very personal, intimate things. So I hope that the film really connects to people now, because she still feels very much ahead of her time, and somebody that like, a woman that feels free to really express all of her emotions and to say what I'm feeling internally is as important, and the world that I'm interacting with. So yeah, she was definitely ahead of her time then, but she feels ahead of her time now.
Yeah. And the film is told with so much of her art as well. And
Mm.
you take it a step further and really embellish the visuals with animation. Who did you work with on the visual and how did you come up with that concept?
It was, it was a bold decision that we made from the beginning, because obviously we were gonna play a little bit with this iconic art, right? But we saw her paintings as part of her voice. We had her writings, we had her words, but the paintings are also very much kind of like a view into her internal world. And we wanted, for that paintings to come alive in a cinematic way and be part of the storytelling of the film. So we decided, really early on to animate. We never bring in elements that are outside of her paintings, but we give movement, and we highlight some of the emotions in her paintings through our animation. And we work with this amazing group that came together for a film of, led by two female animators in Mexico City. And our team was mostly female. And it was really important for me to also work with Latinx talent, and here in the United States, but also in Mexico. So all the animation happened down there. And yeah, I think that it is a strong way of bringing another aspect of her voice to life, but it's her visual voice.
And we really learned a lot about her relationship with Diego Rivera, which
Mhm,
they were married, divorced, remarried. She put conditions on their
mhm.
remarriage. I mean, they really butted heads quite a bit. But what ultimately do you think kept them together? Because they really just they couldn't stay away from each other no matter what the other tended to do to the other.
So it wasn't a perfect relationship. She
Um,
was in yeah, in his shadows for a long time. And again, that was kind of our goal. Like, we didn't want to show this perfect love story. Their love story was, it was very problematic. Sometimes it was very toxic. It was obsessive love. And at the same time, there was also a supportive partnership, and there was a lot of support and, and passion, desire, and love as well. And that's what we wanted to show. Like I think a lot of the responses that we've gotten from people that have watched the film is that, it is how we love, right? Relationships are complicated, and she wasn't perfect in dealing with that love. She wasn't a perfect person at all. But we wanted to show the electricity between them, the support between them, but at the same time, the problems that they had. And there were problems.
There were
It was
problems.
an intense, it was a very intense, very volatile relationship. But they really truly love each other, and they were present in, all of their lives. They were very important to each other as well.
And you got a lot of his words as well. I mean,
Mhm.
was that part of her collection, or did you have to outsource those from Diego?
So the film is told entirely through first-person testimony. So it's mainly Frida's voice, but you also hear the voices from people that were present throughout her life. So Diego is a big part of that. You also hear from, some friends, from her first lover, from the nurse that took care of her at the end of her life. So this is all kind of like direct witnessing of her days here on earth, and her emotions. Um, with Diego, he wrote a couple of biographical, essays, and also a book. And so we took a lot from there. And there were some also interviews that he did where he talks about Frida. So we used, sometimes like interviews that people made, about Frida after Frida's death. We also used some essays that people wrote, of the time, and even diary entries of other people. So yeah, the collection, the research, and the collection of not only archival footage and archival pictures, but also the archival writings, were, immense in this film.
Well, it's beautiful to watch and
Thank
so
you.
informative. And Carla, thank you so much for joining Gold Degree's film documentary panel today.
Thank you so much for having me.